app dev and DevOps, containers, app modernization, all the digital transformation elements that I know are so important to what's going on in the world right now. And super excited to have him here today. He's joining us from Austin, Texas in the US. Currently sharing his office with a few dogs, 3 cats, and occasionally his Roomba comes in to visit as well. And he's going to talk us through some of the things that Google Cloud is doing with app modernization, specifically using their Anthos platform. And super excited to have him here today. Christopher Grant, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And good morning to everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. We've got a bunch of things to cover today. Just kind of a little bit of background first. As Chris mentioned, my name is Christopher Grant. I'm actually an app dev focused architect. And my background actually comes from the implementation side. I actually worked with a bunch of Fortune 50 companies for most of my career, actually doing app modernization before it was cloud, and then migrating a couple big companies over to the cloud as well. So I moved over to Google because it was so much fun, and I wanted to kind of help everybody else out with that as well. So that's kind of my background and kind of where I came from on this. Before we get into this though, we kind of wanted to check in with you guys and kind of get a feel for where you guys are at. So we have a couple poll questions. Maybe we can bring those up on the screen real quick and kind of work through those. So really the first one here is, where do you guys spend your time? What's kind of your focus? I know people would kind of come from different areas, but do you spend more of your time in development, infrastructure, DevOps, operations? What is it? Cool. And we'll just give that just one more minute. Right, and then I don't know if we can show the results from that, if those are available. All right, looks like most people are coming from the development arena. Good. So this is an app dev talk with 51% there, and then it looks like it's pretty much split between the rest of them: infrastructure, DevOps, and operations. Awesome. So let's move on to the second one. Another quick poll. Another quick poll. Let's see. Bring that one up. All right. So this one's really more focused on where are you guys at in your modernization journey? What are some of the challenges you guys are seeing? Is it really, convincing people that they need to change it all? Lack of skills, people maybe not knowing the cloud. Maybe there's concerns about the costs and the risks of moving to the cloud and moving to, modernized software. And then frequently this comes up as well. What are some of the security concerns, or, how do we actually run this in production? We don't want to, take our mission critical apps down, obviously, when we're making these changes. So which of these is most applicable to you? All right, and we'll just switch over and see what the results are on that. Nice, good split, good split. Looks like lack of skills is a challenge. That's definitely a challenge. There's a lot to learn, and hopefully we can cover some of that for you here. It's interesting because there's a lot of different tools that come out pretty much every day, and it's funny because being at Google Cloud, you think that we'd have a lot of information, but I personally am trying to come up to speed on this every day. There seems to be something new, and so that is a real challenge. Today we're going to cover a few main areas. We're going to talk about Anthos, which is our application modernization platform, and we'll get into that. A couple of core components of that. Cloud Run I want to talk about a little bit, config management, and service mesh. But why are we talking about these things? Well, You know, we talked to a lot of different companies. This is a McKinsey study about what CEOs are interested in, and it tends to come down to a lot of the same types of questions. You know, CEOs want to move faster. They want to see more features move to production. They want to reduce costs, whether that's infrastructure or just operations, being able to actually have more efficient people power on that. And so this question keeps coming up. You know, we started years ago with Agile, you know, we moved to the cloud, we moved to microservices, all of these buzzwords come up. But really the whole focus is how do I move faster and do that more effectively and efficiently? At Google, really, we kind of focus on the idea of moving to containers, and the industry as a whole has kind of seen this as well. And containers are really fantastic because they help you make your applications a lot more portable, so you're not locked into a specific environment. You can move things around. In addition to that, the process of actually delivering your applications becomes a lot more streamlined regardless of what's in that container as well. So there's a lot of different benefits to that. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get to that, whether it's, you know, going directly to a new platform, or to actually go through and do kind of more of a lift and shift and then move out to the cloud. And so we're going to talk about, you know, kind of how some of the tools we have can help with that, really more focus on the app dev space and kind of, you know, from a development perspective, how Anthos might help with that. But just to kind of wrap up some getting to know you questions, we've got two more quick polls, if we can bring those up. If we can bring those polls up. All right, so so this is really kind of, you know, where are you with your modernization journey? Are you guys using containers yet? Are you just, you know, still focusing on the VMs, or are you running containers in production already? So just a quick poll, and we'll move on. Let's see. All right, and what are the results on that one? All right, good. Yeah, that's pretty typical. So it's just starting to explore containers with about 55% on that one, and then about split on the other ones as well. And then the last question that we have from the polling standpoint. And this one was really kind of, where are you looking to focus your efforts? Which of these is going to be most impactful for your organization? Easier access to environments for the development teams, a lower friction CI/CD process, the idea of utilizing microservices, moving to smaller apps to kind of move to production faster, or kind of more of the production runtime space, more comprehensive maintenance and operational capabilities. So do a quick poll on that one, and then we'll wrap up this section. All right, let's switch over and take a look at the results from that. Okay, cool. So CI/CD is one of the larger challenges, with about 30% on that. Easier access to environments, 22%. Smaller apps, 23%. Pretty much split on the other ones as well. Cool. So I will actually share my screen this time, since apparently I missed that on the last one. Just to kind of recap, here's the slides that I showed you between the polls. We're just going to run through the agenda. Here's that McKinsey study that I mentioned. But what we really want to talk about is getting into Anthos and what is Anthos. So Anthos is really this platform for app modernization. And the idea here is there's a lot of things going on, whether it's from the development standpoint, the platform standpoint, security, and runtime as well. And so this is really a comprehensive suite of tools that are at use here. I wanted to kind of throw this slide in because kind of the fintech industry, we actually are seeing a lot of adoption in this space, really kind of due to some of the speed of development that you can get, but also the ability to apply policies and security efficiently across the entire stack. So it brings kind of the best of both worlds. The ability for the devs teams to move faster, but kind of the ability for your security and operations team to kind of govern what's going on. So it's really, really interesting to see how the fintech industry is kind of picking this up. So what is Anthos? It's got a bunch of different components in there. Some of the key things, though, is really focusing on the idea that we've got Google Cloud Platform as kind of your base here. But for years, Google's been driving Kubernetes and our managed GKE instance, which people have really come to in the industry really adopt. They've seen a lot of value in that. And on top of that, we built a lot of different toolings. And we'll go through a bunch of these in this discussion, but not all of them. So definitely, check out Anthos on the Google Cloud site for more information. But really, the idea here, we've got some service mesh, for microservices, config manager. We'll talk about a little bit for managing your policies, operations, unified operations with Stackdriver, marketplace for partner solutions, which is a really easy way to install things. We talked about, kind of moving from on-prem to cloud. That's where Anthos Migrate comes in, a really easy way to kind of take existing VMs and port them to containers. Cloud Run is a serverless thing. We'll get into that here. Cloud Build from a CI/CD perspective, and then Cloud Code, which we'll talk about as well in this session. But it's not just about the cloud. It's about how do we run these things wherever your workloads need to run. So we can actually run this on-prem as well. So we have a solution called GKE on-prem, which allows you to take the same capability of GKE that we have in the cloud, all of the features, the updates, the maintenance, and actually have that running in your data center so that you can actually start to do your migrations from on-prem and stay on-prem, but start to utilize the new stack within your data center. But you're still using a lot of the Google Cloud platforms and services and experience that we bring to the table. But in addition to that, we actually allow you to run GKE on AWS as well. So you could take our same exact platform, GKE, run it on-prem and run it on AWS and use their underlying infrastructure. And so this comes in because a lot of companies may be using, an older model. They got on early with AWS and they want to be able to branch out, or they want to standardize on some, some broader tools like Istio and some things like that, and not have to worry about the management and the maintenance of it. And really, that's kind of where we wanted to drive these services across the entire ecosystem, regardless of where you're at. You can use Service Mesh, Config Manager, get into Anthos and Cloud Run and the rest of these things. And it really doesn't matter where you're running these things. And we want to provide a unified experience across all of these platforms for you. But we understand that customers have their own tooling on-prem and other vendors as well. So, if you've got a different operating stack, and you don't want to use Stackdriver, you can definitely bring in, Prometheus, Grafana, Elasticstack, whatever tools you have. If you don't want to use Cloud Code, bring your own IDE. If you don't want to use Cloud Build, you can bring Jenkins. So the idea here is that you can actually, swap out and use the different tooling in the different places that make sense for you. And we really wanted to kind of meet you where you are in that stack. So really what I've got, the format for this session, I've got a couple different sections kind of built in here. And what I thought we could do is kind of go through, I'll talk a little bit about, some of the components. I'm going to try to do some demos. We'll see if my computers have enough coffee this morning, if it's woken up enough. And then at the end of them, we'll take maybe 1 or 2 questions if you have them about that particular section. And then at the end of this entire session, we'll do a kind of a broader Q&A if you had any other questions. So as we're going through this, try to keep you awake. We'll think up any questions that you might have, and we'll hit those at the end of each of these sections. All right, so Cloud Run is actually really exciting. So Cloud Run is really Kubernetes the easy way. I like to think of this as the best of App Engine, Cloud Functions, and Kubernetes all rolled into one. It's a serverless solution that really adds on a lot of capabilities to Kubernetes, but actually allows you to access the same container-based technologies that you would if you were going to Kubernetes, but kind of access them in more of a serverless slash PaaS pattern. Auto scaling, so with Kubernetes as an example, you typically do CPU or memory-based scaling. It's a little bit slower. You can do some custom metrics in there if you want to do some auto scaling on that as well. But Cloud Run is really focused on request-oriented auto scaling, handles traffic spikes really well. And that gets into this next one here, which is that it actually can scale down to 0 on its own and then scale back up when it gets the next request. You can't do that with Kubernetes. You can do auto scaling with Kubernetes, but they're still going to have one of the pods sitting around managing that request. And then the other part of this is that there's interesting load balancing techniques with Cloud Run. You can do request space, you can do traffic splitting, blue-green, a lot easier. You can technically do those with Kubernetes, but you have to get into Istio and understand the YAMLs and kind of mess around a lot more technically with what's going on. So there's a lot of great capabilities that extend what Kubernetes had. What's nice about Cloud Run, though, is that it's not just a proprietary stack that we have. It's actually built off of Knative, which is an open source platform that we created and put out there for everybody. So you can actually take Knative and install that anywhere you want. If you have your own distribution of Kubernetes on-prem, you can actually install Knative on-prem and do all the same things on-prem on your own that you would in the cloud as well. So Cloud Run is a fully managed one that we have in the cloud, and then if you wanted to install it on your own, you have Knative. There's also this hybrid variation of this, which is we've got fully managed Cloud Run in the cloud, and we talked about Knative wherever you want. But if you have a need to extend beyond what Cloud Run managed offers you, you can actually use Cloud Run for Anthos, which will allow you to run Cloud Run on GKE and get access to things like extended memory, TPUs, GPUs, access to your VPC, a lot of advanced capabilities that maybe you don't have that you need beyond what managed Cloud Run offers. So let's stop talking about this and take a look at this. There's a lot of other capabilities in here. Per request billing is another good example. But I wanted to show you how quick and easy this is. So this is the Google Cloud Platform Cloud Run screen, and I'm just going to go through here and quickly select these things. So we'll just call this hello. Apparently my caps lock is on. We'll just call this hello. You can choose whether you want it authenticated or unauthenticated. We'll say unauthenticated for now. Which container image? So all you need to do is choose a image. If you have images in your cloud registry, you can actually pick from there. We're just going to choose this hello world one just to kind of show you quickly what this does. And so just like that, it's grabbing the image and creating a service for us. And in about 20 seconds or so, it'll actually give us an HTTPS endpoint with, and just like that, we've got the application deployed, and it's given us a URL for this. I didn't have to manage any load balancers. I didn't have to install any certificates. I didn't have to do anything really crazy like that. A really simple deployment capabilities. You've got access to the logs. You can actually drill in and see what's going on with the logs in here. If I have any logs, there's some logs. So hello from Cloud Run was from the container. You can dig in, actually look at the YAML if you want, and see the permissions and all the rest of this. So the other part of this, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more later, is the idea that you can do multiple versions. And I'm just going to skip over this now because I want to show you kind of how this interacts with some of the other things. We'll come back to this in a second. But there's some really great traffic management capabilities, and we'll show that in a second. The thing here is that what you notice, though, is I just took an existing image. And really, this is an app dev conversation. And so how do you actually do app dev? And what I wanted to kind of highlight is this tool we have called Cloud Code. If you've done any development with Kubernetes, you know how frustrating it is. There's a lot of YAML files. How do you debug this stuff? How do you even see the logs? How do you get access to that? There's so many YAML files, so many moving parts, and more of your time you're spending outside of your code. And it's like, how do I just get back to coding on that? So really, that's what the IDEs and this local development is really focused on. You know, we talk about this inner loop, you know, where you just edit, compile, run all locally, and we want to keep things as local and consistent as possible for you, the developers. So Cloud Code comes in and integrates a lot of these tools that we have with your development environment. So you don't have to jump out to the console like we just did. You don't have to click on the UI and do the deploys there. You don't have to really get into doing YAML if you don't want. And so Cloud Code is a integration to it's an integration to VS Code or IntelliJ, a bunch of different editors. We've got a couple slides here on that in a second. But really the idea here, let's get over and I'll show you some demos. It's more fun to actually look at this in practice. And after this, we'll open it up for both Cloud Run and Cloud Code. So if you're familiar with VS Code at all, you can add these different extensions. So there's an extension for Cloud Code. Basically what I wanted to do though is kind of show you a little bit about how this works. So simply put, we've got these sample applications that you can start with. We'll just create a sample application. We'll just do a simple Flask application for this example. Where do I want that? So it installs these sample applications for you. So, you know, nothing fancy in here. You know, we're gonna take a look at this in a second. You know, it basically just puts out a hello world on this. But what's nice about this is that you can actually interact with Cloud Run and Kubernetes in here. And so if I jump over to the Cloud Run tab in here, it's actually polling the services that we just stood up first time this morning. So hopefully everything runs correctly. And here's that hello service that we just created through the UI. And if I go in here, you can actually see the version that I did here. Click into here, you've got the container that was executed. If I click on the top here, I've actually got the endpoint, the URL endpoint. I click on that, I actually bring up the endpoint itself, which is nice. And then from this screen here, I can actually deploy a new version. So this code here, I'm actually going to deploy to this service. So I don't have to go to the UI. I don't have to do anything crazy. This is actually going to do the build and deploy for me from my local. It'll actually post the image to GCR IO for me. Just some basic stuff here. You know, which service we want. All, you know, hello, where's my Docker file? So go ahead and deploy that. And once that deploys, you'll see I will have another revision showing up over here. And if I want, I can actually see all of the logs in the build process. So it's actually doing the deploy right now. And we should have that live in just a second. What's nice about this is that I didn't have to do that build step in there. I didn't have to worry about what the YAMLs were or any of the G-Cloud commands and to jump out there. If I come over, and so that's running now. If I come over, it's switching over traffic. Now this is updating in my UI to show me the new revision. If I come over here and I refresh this screen as well, you'll see the new revision here show up. So it says non-serving revision. I'm on revision 2. That's revision 1. And over here, I've got the 2 versions as well. So let's go take a look and see what that looks like. If you remember, the other version of this had flashy stuff, and this one is a basic hello world. So that's really nice. What's really cool about this though is you can actually then go and you can say, hey, I want to manage traffic on this, and I want each of these to have 50%. So I type in 50%, it automatically adjusts the calculation because my math is bad. And so I don't have to worry about that. Now it's going to actually do traffic splitting automatically between these 2 versions for me. I didn't have to get into Istio much. I didn't have to really worry about, you know, what the YAMLs were doing. So now it's just swapping back and forth 50% between the different versions of this. And so that's a really easy way to do traffic shaping on your services. And I didn't really have to get into anything too complicated on that. What's nice about Cloud Run and containers is that as your applications grow and you move kind of beyond some of the basic capabilities, let's say you decided that this app needs to interact with microservices and you need to get into kind of the smaller, get integrated into a service mesh as an example, or you needed to extend and utilize Kubernetes more. What's interesting is that you can actually just take this exact application. Now, this application already has, it's got the Kubernetes manifest in here if you want to deploy to Kubernetes. But right from this stack here, I can actually go to the Kubernetes page and see all of my clusters that are running. I've got 3 clusters running. I can actually, I believe this, let me just double check. I think this is my dev cluster yet. So I can deploy right to this dev cluster and run this on Kubernetes. And so it's basically going to do the same thing, but in this case, it's going to deploy it to Kubernetes. And so what's nice about this is that depending on what environment your company is set up with, you can still use Cloud Code, you still work locally with a lot of these tools. And then in a second here, I'll show you actually how this actually integrates a little bit better with your local environment. So typically, you need to have an endpoint, a public endpoint for these things. What Cloud Code does in this case, though, is actually does a proxy for you. And if you notice here, this is my local host. If I bring this up, I've got the same exact application, but it's actually running in this dev cluster. And actually, we can drill down into the dev cluster and see that. I'll open that up. If you wanted to, you can drill down. So here's the deployments, and this is actually the Hello World one that we just deployed. And then I've got this running locally. If you look in here a little bit closer, though, what it's actually doing is it's actually streaming the logs out here. So it says streaming the logs from this container. So I don't have to log into Kubernetes and see this. I've got access right here from my local environment to that. And then once I stop running this, but this is actually really nice too, just from a maintenance standpoint, it actually deleted from Kubernetes, deleted my deployment. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you here is that you can actually do debugging on here. So let's say, so it's going to go through and still do the same deployment stuff on here. But what I want to do is I want to debug this particular line here. I'm going to attach to that container. And this is my super fancy deployment. So it's attached, which is great. But I set a marker on that. Let's go ahead and pull this up. So now it's stopped there and it's showing me the local variables. I can actually change that here if I can select it. So now I'm interacting with this the same way I would locally, but this is actually a remote cluster and I'm interacting with the variables. I'm setting breakpoints and everything that you would normally do with your local development. So it's a really, really great tool for local development and working with your clusters. There's a ton of stuff in here. Definitely didn't have enough time to go through all of this. I did want to take a pause though and see what kind of questions you guys had on either Cloud Code or Cloud Run. We've got a couple other sections to go through, but I just wanted to kind of take a pause and see if you guys had any questions on that. You can use the Q&A panel if you had any questions on that. Cool. All right, and like I said, it doesn't look like we have any questions yet on this. We will open it up at the end for a broader Q&A if you think of anything else that you want to bring up about this. So that was really just from a development standpoint. And when we talk about, kind of this app modernization path, it goes beyond just the developer experience. And it goes to how do you actually go from one monolith into many microservices, into many teams deploying at different speeds across life cycles, across environments, across cloud vendors. We talked earlier about being able to run this on-prem, on AWS, on Google. So we wanted to talk, about some of the features that we offer related to kind of this unified management concept. And, some of this gets a little bit more into the operations space, but it does come back around to the development space as well. So just as a simple example here, what we're trying to do is provide you kind of this single console for managing all of your applications, all of your clusters. So with Anthos, you can install on-prem, on AWS, in GCP. You can actually bring your own clusters as well. And in this single console, you can actually get access to all of those clusters. You can do the upgrades, you can see what's going on, you can see the workloads. and actually manage them from that. And so it's great from an operational standpoint. But from a security and policy management standpoint, it's really challenging to have to deal with all of the different clusters, what's running on them, making sure that they stay the way they are, that there's no configuration drift. And so Anthos config management is a way for you to actually consistently apply policies and resources across all of your clusters, regardless which cluster, where that cluster is. And basically what it does is you have a centralized repository where you manage your configs, and then all of the clusters you have, regardless of whether they're on-prem, or other vendors with Google Cloud, dev, stage, prod, whatever the environment is, can synchronize to that and apply that policy. It allows you to kind of use this GitOps approach, which, you know, as software developers we're really acclimated to, but from an operations side, it provides a lot of extra value. You know, being able to check in your code, do code reviews, and then have an auditable way to push those things to production through an automated system. And so by using, you know, kind of this GitOps model, you actually get additional capacity, additional capabilities for your clusters. This is just a simple example of some of the things you can do with ACM. So in this case, we're disallowing root. And now this is a lot of YAML. You don't necessarily have to get into this, but I wanted to kind of show you kind of some of the types of things that you can do. So in this case, you know, we're limiting, you know, what the quota is on the team in a specific namespace. We're ensuring in this last one here that Istio is encrypting everything, and that it's using MTLS for secured authentication between the different services. All of this is done through just applying these to your Git repository. But it doesn't have to be these policies. It can be deployments. It can be logging agents. It can be daemon sets. It can be whatever you need to have running on those particular clusters. One of the other nice things about ACM is that it has this idea of an abstract namespace. When you start to scale out to many different clusters, many different teams, many different namespaces, you don't want to have to go in and apply your policies every single time there's a new namespace. Really what you want to be able to do is say, hey, I've got a new team, a new application. I just want to create a new space for them. And then anything above that, I want it to cascade down. So if you were to put some policies at this root level or at this online level, as an example, and then you created a staging namespace for the shipping team, all of those all of those policies and deployments that you create at the top here would automatically cascade down to that namespace. And so you don't have to manage it at this super fine-grained level. You can actually manage all your clusters at a higher level. So what does this actually look like in practice? This is that was a lot of kind of abstract talk on that. So let's get in and actually take a look at some of this in practice. Let's see if I can remember where I'm at. All right, so I don't need this one anymore. So I've got some notes here. What I want to do is I've got a couple clusters running here. Here we go. So in the dev environment, really that's for the developers. We're just going to let them do whatever they want. But for stage and prod, I want to make sure that I've got my applications running consistently. So if I take a look at the workloads for these clusters, you'll see that I've got what we call this Bank of Anthos app deployed to my prod cluster. If we go to the services, we can actually see the services that are running for that. We can check out the front end for this particular application. It's just a simple sample banking application that we have. It's got a bunch of microservices in there. So this is running there. But what you'll notice is that I don't have in anything for my stage cluster yet. So there's really nothing running in my stage cluster. What I wanted to do here is show you how easy this is to apply this and make this happen. So what I'm going to do here is let me just make sure I'm on the right cluster. No, I don't want to be on that. Switch over to stage. By the way, if you haven't used it, kubectx is a really great little utility. for switching contexts and namespaces. So basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply this repository configuration. And what it's telling me is I basically say, hey, I want this cluster to synchronize with this GitHub repository. It's my repository. It happens to be called cluster config. I've got a copy of it here. We'll take a look at that in a second. And I want to synchronize the branch, stage, and I want to synchronize the directory called sample. So in here, I've got a directory called sample, and you'll see some structure in there. So if I go ahead and apply that, I can find my. So it created that, and what you'll see here in just a second as I switch over to the workloads page is that all of those resources start to apply. So first thing is it's going to apply some of the config management capabilities in here. And then it's going to come through and actually apply all of the bank of Anthos and all of the different namespaces and all of the other capabilities that we talked about in there. And so we're going to let that run and come up. But what I also wanted to show you is this, what we call configuration drift capability. So if I switch back over to, watch a little bit here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you what's running in these environments just from the command line. So you see here, I've got namespaces set up here, and all of my resources that we just deployed, hit refresh here, are getting applied, and they're coming up, which is great. But what I wanted to show you here is kind of how we can take an existing, how easy it is to apply a new policy in here. So just double check on the time, make sure we're good on time here. We got to probably speed up a little bit. But what I'm going to do is basically all I'm doing here is I'm going to apply a application, and I'm going to create a new namespace here. And this is just going to create a file in our cluster config. So if I go in here, you'll see now I have a Temenos namespace that was just created. And now we're going to we'll commit this. So I push that up. What did I do? All right, just because of time, I'm going to skip that just for a second here. What I wanted to show you is if I had updated that and my coffee was kicking in, then I would have been able to show you that this shows up just in a second here on the right. But what I want to show you is, let's see which one I'm on. I'm on stage. So if I switch over to prod and then if I delete the Bank of Anthos namespace, what will happen is if you watch over here, it says it's terminating, which you would expect because I just deleted it. But right away, it'll actually come back and the config management platform will say, hey, you're not supposed to be deleting that. You're supposed to be putting that back. So it'll actually put Bank of Anthos back in there for me. And it's actually going through and deleting all those pods right now, but it'll actually go and then replace all of the details for me. Let's see if that's coming up here. So I've got a whole mess of things going on because I'm trying to do multiple things. But that's what we call the configuration drift. And basically making sure that if something happens different from a manual standpoint, in this case, deleted, you'll see now it's back, it's going back, Bank of Anthos is coming back. That if something happens manually or out of scope for that cluster, then the config management system will automatically make sure that it gets applied and stays up to date. So config management is great from a standpoint of being able to apply policies across clusters, across environments. And in the console here, you get access to see all of your applications, all of your clusters running in one spot. Here's a great example of being able to see stage and prod next to each other. If I had on-prem, you'd be able to see all your on-prem things. If you had this in AWS, you'd be able to see that as well. So that really kind of takes it to kind of up that level from the developer to kind of that platform team being able to see what's going on and kind of manage the operations a little bit more. That was kind of the whirlwind tour of ACM. Do you guys have any questions on that so far? Let's see. For source control, Git and cloud, it's possible to work with some branches. I'm not sure if I'm following the question, so we'll come back to that a little bit more, but with ACM specifically, you have a lot of different capabilities here to be able to integrate with different branches and different branches, different directories in here, different repositories, and actually inside of ACM as well, you have the capability of using what's called cluster selectors. So you can say, hey, I've got a PCI cluster that I want these things applied to, or I've got a, only apply these to my GCP clusters, not my AWS clusters. Only apply this policy to the dev cluster or the prod cluster. And so you can use these cluster selectors across to kind of differentiate where you want these things running. Let's see if there was any other questions that we can answer right now. Cool. All right. So the next thing I wanted to show you was this service mesh capability. And again, I'm running through this just try to give you kind of a broad spectrum here of what some of the capabilities are. Each one of these sections, we typically do like a full day deep dive. If you're interested in any of these sections more, feel free to reach out and we can kind of dig into it a little bit deeper. Really just kind of want to give you a higher level view at this point. What I wanted to show you here though is the next step, which is kind of moving over to service mesh. So the idea with service mesh is that I've got lots of little applications out there, and I want to secure these things. I want to make sure that they're talking together correctly. I don't want everybody being able to access my balance service or my transfer service. And so what we talk about is this idea of a service mesh. What a service mesh does is basically you've got your service running out there, and the Istio service mesh technology injects this proxy in and intercepts all the requests in and outbound from that service. The proxy understands where all of the other services are running, and so it'll then route those connections over to the other service. This gives you the capability to lock things down, to do traffic shaping, to do more advanced operational capabilities like throttling and circuit breaker technologies. And then because these proxies are in here, you also get the ability to see what's going on and get telemetry on these things and actually get insights what's going on with your code. I kind of recommend that even if you're not sold on the idea of Istio yet, just to try it out, just to get the telemetry portion of that. And you'll see why in a second. It doesn't change your architecture. It doesn't change any development capabilities that development process that you have to put in. But from an operational standpoint, it adds a lot of extra capabilities in there. So service mesh is really broken into two parts. We have a managed Istio control plane, which brings in these backend components, traffic director, managed CA, and gives you the Google managed backend for a lot of these Istio components. But it also brings you kind of this front end service management dashboard, which we're going to demo here in a second. And really that kind of gives you good insights on what's going on with your code, allows you to set SLAs, really focus on how your application is structured. When we started out with a monolith, Java stacks, we had good stack traces, we had process heaps we could look at. We could actually drill in and see what's going on. Once we move to separated applications, we lose a lot of that insight and really kind of lose what's going on. And so with tools like ASM, we get the ability to kind of bring that back and actually see what's going on. So this is an example of the service mesh dashboard that we have in here. First off, the thing you'll notice is right out of the box, I didn't have to do anything to get this metrics. Because of the way that Istio works, all of these metrics are funneled up and into this dashboard for us. So if you've ever followed any of the SRE practices, the DevOps practices, a lot of that deals with understanding what the metrics are for your application. However, if you've ever tried to produce those metrics or curate those metrics, it's very, very difficult to do on your own. Understanding, what your error rates are, being able to pull your latency, getting that for all of the different applications across your entire stack is often very difficult. So just out of the gate, being able to have these key metrics about what your latency is and your key metrics is really important. The other thing is it allows you to really kind of drill down and find what those issues are, which things are out of bounds. You can just do a filter and see which ones is having a problem. You can drill into these things and get a lot more detail about them, find out how are they out of budget. You can get the details on them. Setting these is super easy. It's literally just, I want, what type of a alert do I want? Do I want it on latency? Do I want it on errors? What percentage do I want? Click button and you're done on that, which is really nice. One of the other things that is really helpful in here, and you may have seen it on the other screen, is this topology view. And the topology view allows you to basically see your entire ecosystem in one place. And you can zoom in and zoom out on these things. Let's see if I can take a look at this checkout service. It gives you your actual request per second across all of the different backends on this. You can also drill in. So this is a deployment. I can drill in more to the deployment, and you see that I've got things running in there. I can drill in and see that this is the actual pod. And let's see if this is a good example. If there's multiple pods and containers running in there, you can actually drill in and see the individual request per second per container in there, which is really, really significant. Oh, sorry, getting a little dizzy. So if I click on this, collapse these out, you can get a different service. Let's collapse the outside one. There we are. So this is really, really useful. You also notice that there's alerts listed on these things. You can click on that. You'll get the overview that we saw on the main page, but it'll actually then take you over to the dashboard itself, and where you can actually set these. So there's a lot of different capabilities from an ASM standpoint, both from the backend managed capabilities of Traffic Director or Managed CA, also from kind of getting that insight and introspection on what's going on with your applications. What I was going to show you here is you can actually drill into the health of the individual service as well. You can actually get to the logs of them. You can see what's connected. It'll tell you if these are secured or not secured on here. So if you have like inbound or outbound connections that are not secured, it'll alert you on that. Let's see, the logs, you can drill into the logs directly from this page. So if there are errors happening, you don't have to jump around to lots of different dashboards, things like that. So that was a really whirlwind tour of Anthos. Like I said, each of these sections typically a day long, but I did want to kind of open it up and see if you guys had any questions at this point. We're kind of coming up on time, but I want to make sure we left some time for you guys to ask any questions. Cool. So there was a comment in there that Service Mesh looks like Kiali. Yeah, and actually what's interesting about that is you can definitely go and use Kiali on there. The interesting thing though is that this actually is designed to kind of integrate with kind of a larger pattern and provide more integrated capabilities than Kiali. So if you're just getting started and you've and taken a look at some of the open source tools, Kiali gives you some of that higher the topology graph that I showed there. But really what we're looking at here is the ability to do that across clusters, integrate with on-prem. Plus it also brings the managed Istio backend to you. And then you also get the ability to kind of drill in and get to the logs, get to Sapphire logs, things like that. So is there a developer account? Yeah, so if you go to Anthos, let me see if I can bring this up. I'll see if I can share. I'm not, there is a free trial that we can, that you can click on. It's actually in our marketplace. And I lost my screen. Anyways, I lost my screen sharing, but you can actually go and install basically kind of the stack that we showed, and it'll install all the capabilities for you. You know, and it's part of the free trial that you have. If you continue to let it run, eventually you'll start getting charged for it. But there's a quick starts in here. If you go to quick starts under the Anthos page, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the config management. But anyways, there's a quick start in here that can actually take you to install that, and you just click one button and try Anthos is what I was trying to get to. One button, click, and it'll install everything for you. So definitely take a look at that. Additional cost to ASM. So what's nice about Anthos is that it's based off of the number of CPUs that you have. So you've got access to everything in the stack, you know, for one cost, which is nice. So if you choose to use ACM, ASM, if you want to use the backends, basically that's based off of like an all-you-can-eat type model. You know, you basically just focus on the CPU costs. So it's a kind of a service cost per CPU, which is kind of nice. And then actually there's separate pricing if you choose to do the on-prem versus the cloud. As an example, let's say you're kind of more cloud native and you don't need to do on-prem. That's a different costing model as well, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's see, would Temenos development driven by Google Cloud, Anthos platform going forward? So I'm not really sure I'm following the question exactly on this one, but what's nice about the platform, and I showed it a little bit with the service, the cloud run capabilities, is there's ability to quickly and easily add environment variables. So one common thing that comes up when you're integrating with APIs and other tools is how do you actually do the authentication on that? And so I'm just gonna move to the next screen because I wanted to show you on this next screen here. We'll call this Hello 2. So under advanced settings here, you can actually set a lot of important information, you know, obviously arguments and things like that, but you can also pass in environment variables. And so this is where you would include different things like, you know, API keys, using secrets manager to kind of contain some of those things. You know, where is the actual endpoint if you wanted to point to a dev API or a production API. So definitely a good combination of, you know, kind of reaching out and running some components here, but then stitching things together with various different backends and APIs. Cool. Let's see. Cool. So we'll probably need to get some of the Temenos team to talk about how to actually deploy this to different environments. But if anybody's interested, we can definitely kind of do a deep dive later on how to kind of connect those two. Do you guys have any additional questions? Cool. Well, I think that's just about it from the high level on this. Again, like I mentioned, if you guys had any interest in service mesh or cloud code or any of the Anthos stack, feel free to give us a call, and we'll definitely get you hooked up Like I said, this is really getting used a lot in the fintech space to kind of get applications out the door faster, but then also provide additional levels of governance and security around them. So definitely worth looking into. Cool. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you for your time, and we will talk to you all later.
Thank you. Thank you, Christopher, for your session today. It was really great indeed. We appreciate that. And I want to thank all the audience for joining us today. We have a couple more webinars coming up, so go to Basecamp events page and you can subscribe, you can register to those events. And if you have any questions in future, you can also use Basecamp forum and post your questions over there, or write into us at basecamp@temenos.com. We'll make sure we'll give you answers as soon as possible. Make sure you register to the future webinars. And thank you all. We hope to see you again in the future webinars. Thank you so much for joining today.